The Forbidden Zone. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council stretched wide enough to hold representatives from 47 different species. Crystal pillars rose from the floor to the ceiling, each one glowing with soft light. Ambassador Velsharn stood at the center platform, his reptilian scales gleaming under the lights. His tail swished back and forth as he spoke, a sign of barely controlled anger. 200 years, he said, his voice echoing through the chamber. For 200 years, we have avoided one small system at the edge of the galaxy. The Sol system. Terran space. And why? Because of an old warning that no one can even explain anymore. The other ambassadors shifted in their seats. Some looked uncomfortable. Others seemed curious. A few of the older species representatives remained perfectly still, their expressions unreadable. Velsharn continued, his clawed hand pointing at the holographic display floating above the center of the room. It showed a yellow star with 9 planets orbiting around it. A red boundary marked the edge of what was labeled as prohibited space. 3 weeks ago, one of our scouting fleets went missing near this boundary. 6 ships, 200 crew members, gone without a trace. We sent search parties. They found nothing. No debris, no distress signals, nothing. A murmur ran through the chamber. Ambassador Thelnara of the Vosian Collective, an insectoid species known for their careful nature, clicked her mandibles together. The prohibition exists for a reason, Ambassador Velsharn. Perhaps your scouts violated the boundary, and if they did, Velsharn's voice rose. Should we simply accept the loss? The Crithian hegemony does not abandon its people. We have conquered 12 star systems in the last century alone. We have never known defeat, and yet we cower before a species that might not even exist anymore. An ancient voice spoke from the shadows at the edge of the chamber. It belonged to Keeper Zin, one of the oldest beings in the known galaxy. His species had been traveling between stars when most others were still learning to make fire. The humans exist, young Velsharn. Of that you can be certain. Then why do they hide? Velsharn challenged. What are they afraid of? The question, Zin said slowly, is not what they fear. It is what we should fear. Velsharn laughed, a harsh sound that made several ambassadors flinch. Fear? From a species that has not been seen in 2 centuries? For all we know, they destroyed themselves. Perhaps there is nothing left but empty planets and ancient warning buoys. He pressed a button on his control device. The holographic display changed, showing more data. Our long-range scans show no major energy signatures from the Sol system. No communications. No spacecraft. No signs of advanced civilization. I propose that the Council authorize an expeditionary fleet to enter Terran space and investigate. If the humans are gone, we can finally remove this ridiculous restriction. If they still exist, we can bring them into the Empire where they belong. The debate that followed lasted for 3 days. The younger species, those who had joined the Empire in the last century, supported Velsharn's proposal. They saw the prohibition as an old superstition, a relic of more fearful times. The older species urged caution, though few could articulate exactly why. The stories had faded over generations. All that remained was a feeling, a sense that the Sol system should be left alone. In the end, politics won over caution. Velsharn had many allies, and the mystery of the missing scouts provided the excuse he needed. The Council voted to authorize an expeditionary fleet, not just a small scouting force, but a grand armada that would demonstrate the Empire's power and authority. 3,000 warships from 15 different species, representing the greatest military force the galaxy had assembled in decades. Velsharn stood triumphant as the vote concluded. The Empire will finally learn the truth about humanity, he declared. And if they resist, they will learn the price of defying the Galactic Council. As the ambassadors filed out of the chamber, Keeper Zin remained in his seat. He had voted against the measure, but his was only one voice among many. He activated his personal communicator and sent a message to the old archives requesting access to the restricted files. There were records from 200 years ago, testimonies from the species that had met humanity during their brief time in galactic society. Most people ignored these old documents. Zin decided it was time to remember. What he read in the ancient files made his ancient blood run cold. The fleet assembled over the course of 6 weeks at Staging Point Gamma, a massive space station built specifically for military operations. Warships arrived daily through hyperspace gates, each one a masterpiece of destructive capability. The Crithian dreadnoughts were 10 kilometers long, bristling with plasma cannons. The Vosgian carriers held thousands of fighter craft. The Talvorn brought their reality-warping siege ships, weapons that could tear apart planets. Admiral Cross, a Crithian military commander with 30 years of experience, took command of the fleet. He had fought in 16 major campaigns and had never lost a battle. Standing on the bridge of his flagship, the Relentless Dawn, he felt confident. Whatever awaited them in the Sol system, they would overcome it. The night before the fleet's departure, Keeper Zinn managed to gain access to the flagship. He requested an audience with Admiral Cross. The Admiral, busy with final preparations, almost refused, but something in the old Keeper's tone made him agree. Zinn entered the Admiral's ready room, moving slowly on his 4 legs. His translator device hummed as he spoke. "Admiral Cross, I have come to ask you one final time to reconsider this mission." Cross gestured to a chair, though Zinn preferred to stand. "Keeper Zinn, the Council has made its decision. The fleet departs tomorrow." "I have read the old files," Zinn said quietly. "From the time when humanity was part of our community." "Do you know why they left?" "I assume they were afraid of more advanced species," Cross replied. "No." Zinn's tone was heavy. "They were afraid of what they might become if they stayed. The humans looked at our civilization and saw only endless war, conquest, and domination. They asked if it had to be that way. When we told them it did, they chose to leave. They asked only to be left alone. If they wanted to be left alone, they could have simply moved to a distant system," Cross said. "Instead, they issued threats and established a prohibited zone. That is not the action of a peaceful species. Or it is the action of a species that understands their own nature," Zinn replied. "The humans have a saying from their history. Good fences make good neighbors. They built a fence, Admiral. A clear boundary. And now you are about to cross it." Cross stood, his full height impressive even to Zinn. "If the humans have spent 200 years in isolation, they cannot possibly match the combined military might of the Empire. This fleet could conquer half the galaxy. Whatever defenses they have prepared will not be enough." Zinn turned to leave, his movements heavy with sorrow. At the door, he paused. "There is one more thing in the old files. A warning from the last ambassador to meet with human representatives. He wrote, 'They are terrifyingly competent at anything they attempt. We should hope they never attempt war.'" The door closed behind him, leaving Admiral Cross alone with his thoughts. For a moment, just a moment, doubt flickered in his mind. Then he pushed it away. The Empire had never been wrong before. There was no reason to believe they were wrong now. The next morning, 3,000 warships activated their hyperspace drives. Reality bent around them and they vanished from normal space. Their destination, the Sol system, a place that had been forbidden for 200 years. A place that was about to teach the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. First contact redux, the Imperial fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. With perfect precision, 3,000 warships materialized in formation, their sensor arrays immediately beginning to scan the system ahead. Admiral Cross sat in his command chair, watching the data stream across multiple displays. His tactical officers worked efficiently, compiling information and preparing threat assessments. "Report," Cross ordered. Commander Velthra, his second-in-command, studied her console. "Sir, initial scans are complete. 9 planets detected orbiting the primary star. 1 planet in the habitable zone, third from the star. We're detecting no major energy signatures. No communications traffic. No spacecraft in motion," Cross frowned. "Nothing?" "Nothing significant, sir. The system appears largely dormant. What about the missing scout fleet? No debris detected. No wreckage. It's as if they were never here." A communications officer turned in his seat. "Admiral, we're receiving multiple broadcasts. They're coming from everywhere, sir. Thousands of sources throughout the system. Put it on speakers." The message that filled the bridge was calm, almost pleasant. It spoke in perfect galactic standard, the common language used throughout the Empire. "Attention, Imperial fleet. You are entering Terran territory in violation of the Sol prohibition. Turn back now. This is your only warning. Terran Defense Protocol Alpha remains active. You have been warned." The message repeated in dozens of languages, cycling through every known galactic tongue. Cross noted that it included languages from species that had gone extinct or been absorbed into the Empire generations ago. These warning buoys had been broadcasting for a very long time. "How many buoys, Lieutenant?" 17,342, sir. They're positioned throughout the system, creating a complete network. They're old, sir, at least 200 years, based on the materials and power signatures. Cross made his decision. Destroy the nearest 100 buoys. Let's announce our presence properly. The fleet's weapons locked onto the closest warning beacons. Plasma bolts and energy beams lanced through space. The targeted buoys exploded in small flashes of light. The remaining buoys continued their warnings undisturbed. Advance the fleet. Standard approach formation. All weapons ready. The massive armada moved forward, entering the Sol system proper. They passed the orbit of the 8th planet, a ice giant with multiple moons. The sensors showed nothing unusual. They continued inward, passing the 7th planet, then the 6th. Still nothing. This is strange, Velthra said. Where are they? Cross was beginning to wonder the same thing. Had the humans truly vanished? Had they destroyed themselves, leaving only automated warning systems behind? They approached the 5th planet, a massive gas giant with prominent bands of color. The tactical display showed dozens of moons orbiting it. As they drew closer, the sensors began picking up something unusual. Sir, I'm detecting metal, large amounts of it, in the asteroid belt between the 4th and 5th planets. How large? Very large, sir. I'm reading thousands of objects. They're perfectly positioned. Too perfect. This isn't natural. Cross leaned forward. Show me. The main display shifted to show the asteroid belt. What appeared at first to be normal space rocks resolved into something very different. As the sensors analyzed them more carefully, the objects were artificial. Massive structures disguised to look like asteroids, each one larger than the biggest ships in the Imperial fleet. How many? Cross asked quietly. Still counting, sir. At least 10,000. Possibly more. They're dormant, but their power cores are active. They're just waiting. What about the moons around the gas giants? The tactical officer's hands moved quickly across his console. His face changed as he read the results. Sir, they're not all moons. At least half of them are artificial. They're hollow. The structures are enormous. Some are as large as our capital city stations. A cold feeling settled into Cross's stomach. So where are the humans? As if in answer to his question, every console on the bridge suddenly displayed the same image. A simple graphic showing the 3rd planet from the star, the one in the habitable zone. Words appeared below it in Galactic Standard. We are where we have always been, waiting. The communications officer jumped. Sir, that came through our secure systems. They bypassed all our encryption. Before Cross could respond, a new message appeared. This one was a transmission, audio and video. The face that appeared on the screen was unremarkable at first glance. A human male, middle-aged by the look of him, with brown skin and dark eyes. He wore simple clothing, not a military uniform. He smiled, but the smile did not reach his eyes. I am Ambassador Chen of the Terran government. You are Admiral Cross of the Imperial Fleet. You command 3,047 warships carrying a total of 6,300,000 crew members. You have entered our space despite 200 years of clear warnings. Under Terran law, this is an act of invasion. Cross stood from his chair. I am Admiral Cross, and I speak for the Galactic Empire. We come seeking information about our missing scouts. We demand your scouts violated our borders. Chen interrupted calmly. They were captured, their crews detained. All are alive and unharmed. They will be returned to you when you leave our space. You have 30 seconds to begin your withdrawal. If you do not comply, we will consider this a hostile action and respond accordingly. 30 seconds? Cross felt his anger rising. You dare threaten the Imperial fleet? We have 3,000 warships. What do you have? Old warning buoys and hidden platforms? Chen's expression did not change. We have what we need. 20 seconds. I will not be threatened by... 15 seconds. Cross made a cutting gesture across his throat. The communication cut off. He turned to his weapons officer. All ships target those hidden platforms. Prepare to fire on my command. Sir, targeting solutions are ready. 10 seconds. Chen's voice came through again, though Cross had not reopened the channel. The human's face reappeared on every screen. 5 seconds. Fire. Cross ordered. The Imperial fleet opened fire. Thousands of weapons discharged simultaneously, targeting the disguised defense platforms throughout the system. The beams and projectiles crossed the distance at the speed of light. They should have obliterated their targets they never hit. Something happened in the space between the fleet and the platforms. The weapons simply vanished. Energy beams dissipated. Missiles exploded harmlessly. Kinetic projectiles stopped moving as if they had hit an invisible wall, then slowly drifted away. What just happened? Cross demanded. I don't know, sir. Our weapons are gone. They just stopped existing. 0 seconds, Chen said. His face was no longer smiling. You were warned. You did not listen. Now you will learn. The asteroid field came alive. Thousands upon thousands of platforms activated simultaneously. They did not look like weapons. They looked like geometric shapes, perfect spheres and cubes and pyramids that gleamed in the light of Sol. They did not fire. Missiles or energy beams, reality. Around the Imperial fleet began to change. The first ships to be affected simply stopped moving. Their engines fired at full power, but they went nowhere. Tractor beams of incredible strength held them perfectly still. The ships tried to jump to hyperspace. Their hyperdrives activated, but nothing happened. Space refused to bend for them. Then the platforms did something that should have been impossible. They moved the ships. Without touching them, without any visible beam or force, the platforms relocated entire warships across millions of kilometers in seconds. Dreadnoughts that massed billions of tons simply vanished from one location and reappeared in another. The fleet's careful formation dissolved into chaos as ships found themselves scattered throughout the system. Evasive maneuvers, Cross shouted, but it made no difference. His own flagship lurched, and suddenly they were no longer near the asteroid belt. They were in orbit around the massive fifth planet, surrounded by those artificial moons. Small objects began appearing on the sensors. Millions of them. They were tiny, each no larger than a human hand. They moved with impossible speed and precision. Swarms of mechanical insects that flowed through space like water. They reached the ships and began to cut through the hulls. Hull breach. Multiple hull breaches. They're everywhere. Seal all sections? Activate defensive fields. It did not help. The tiny machines passed through defensive shields as if they were not there. They cut through armor that should have resisted anything. Inside the ships, crew members watched in horror as the swarms flowed through corridors. But the machines did not harm them. Instead, they attacked the ship's systems. Power conduits were severed. Computer cores were dismantled. Weapon systems went offline. Within 6 hours, 3,000 warships were dead in space. Not destroyed, not damaged beyond repair, simply turned off, rendered completely helpless. The crews were unharmed but trapped inside their own vessels, which no longer responded to any commands. Admiral Cross sat in his darkened bridge, emergency lighting the only illumination. His proud flagship was now nothing more than a hollow shell. Around him, his officers sat in stunned silence. Chen's face appeared on the emergency displays, powered by some external source since the ship's own power was gone. Admiral Cross, your fleet is captured. Your crews are safe. No one has been killed. This was our choice. We could have destroyed you all in the truth revealed. The transport ship that came for Admiral Cross and his senior officers was not what they expected. It was small, sleek, and moved with a grace that seemed impossible for something mechanical. It docked with the disabled flagship without making a sound. When the airlock opened, a single human stood on the other side. She was young, or at least appeared young, with pale skin and red hair tied back in a simple style. She wore no armor, carried no weapons. She smiled at the assembled officers as if greeting dinner guests rather than prisoners of war. Good morning, Admiral Cross. I'm Lieutenant Sarah Chen, no relation to the ambassador you spoke with earlier. If you and your senior staff would follow me, please. We have a transport waiting. Cross stared at her. You're just one person. You're not even armed. I don't need to be armed, Admiral. Your weapons don't work. Your ships don't work. And even if they did, you've seen what our defense network can do. Please, this way. The ambassador is waiting, and he really does want to talk with you. There was nothing else to do. Cross and 20 of his senior officers followed the young human through the airlock. The interior of the transport was comfortable, almost luxurious. Seats that adjusted to different body types, lighting that changed to suit different species' visual ranges. Even the air was carefully mixed to be breathable for everyone present. How long will the journey take? Velthra asked. About 3 hours, Lieutenant Chen replied. We're taking you to Station Haven. It's in Jupiter's atmosphere. That's the big planet you're orbiting. Why there? Because it's impressive, and the ambassador felt you needed to understand exactly what you're dealing with. The young human's smile was friendly, but her eyes were sharp. Also, it's where we're holding your missing scouts. They're fine, by the way. Annoyed, but fine. The transport detached from the flagship and began to move. Through the viewports, the Imperial officers watched as they descended toward the gas giant. The swirling clouds of Jupiter grew larger and larger. Surely they would stop, turn away. The pressure and heat in a gas giant's atmosphere would crush any ship. They did not stop. The transport plunged into the clouds. The viewports showed nothing but churning orange and red mist. Then they broke through into a clear layer, a space between cloud decks where the atmosphere was thinner. And there, floating in the sky of Jupiter, was a structure that made Admiral Cross's breath catch in his throat. Station Haven was enormous. It dwarfed anything the Empire had ever built. A city in the sky, kilometers across, with towers and domes and structures that seemed to defy physics. It rotated slowly, generating its own gravity. Lights glowed from thousands of windows. Ships moved around it like tiny insects around a hive. How? Cross whispered. The pressure, the heat, the radiation is considerable, Lieutenant Chen agreed, but manageable with the right technology. We've been building stations like this throughout the solar system for the last 200 years. This is just the one we use for guests. The transport docked at a large bay. The officers were led through corridors that were clean, well lit, and filled with humans going about their daily business. Some were in uniforms. Others wore casual clothing. They glanced at the Imperial officers with curiosity but no fear. Children ran past laughing at some game. You have civilians here? Velthra asked. In a military station? Haven isn't a military station, Lieutenant Chen explained. It's a research facility. We study Jupiter's atmosphere, its magnetic fields, its moons. The military installations are elsewhere, much more hidden. They entered a large conference room with windows that showed the swirling clouds of Jupiter below. Ambassador Chen was waiting for them, along with several other humans. They all stood as the Imperial officers entered, a gesture of respect that seemed somehow worse than if they had been hostile. Admiral Cross, Ambassador Chen said, extending his hand in the human greeting gesture. Thank you for coming. Please sit. We have much to discuss. Cross ignored the offered hand and remained standing. We are your prisoners. Do not pretend otherwise. You are detained, Chen agreed. But you are not prisoners in the traditional sense. No one will harm you. You will be fed, given comfortable quarters, and treated with respect. When this conversation is finished, you will be returned to your ships. Your ships will be repaired, and you will be allowed to leave. All we ask is that you listen. Why should we listen to anything you say? Because you came here demanding answers, Chen replied simply. And I'm going to give them to you. Please sit. This will take some time. Slowly, the Imperial officers took their seats around the long table. Ambassador Chen activated a holographic display in the center of the table. It showed images from long ago, from the time when humanity first met the galaxy. 203 years ago, we received your signals. We learned we were not alone in the universe. It was the greatest moment in human history. Chen's voice was warm with the memory. We built ships. We traveled to your worlds. We met dozens of species, learned hundreds of languages. We shared our culture, our art, our science, and we learned about yours. The holographic display showed images of early human explorers, their faces full of wonder and hope, meeting alien beings for the first time, trading information, building friendships. It took us 5 years to understand the truth about the galactic community. Chen continued, his tone growing colder. You were not a community. You were an empire built on conquest. Every species we met had either conquered others or been conquered themselves. War was constant. Slavery was common. Genocide was a tool of policy. Cross shifted uncomfortably. The strong rule the weak. This is the natural order. Is it? Chen looked at him with something like pity. We asked that question. We asked if it had to be that way. Could the galaxy not find a better path? Could species not cooperate as equals rather than as masters and slaves? And what answer did you receive? We were laughed at, Chen said softly. We were told we were naive, childish, that we would learn better when we grew up. Some species tried to conquer us, assuming we would be easy prey. We defended ourselves, and they were surprised by our effectiveness. Other species tried to recruit us, wanting to use human soldiers in their wars. We refused. The holographic display changed, showing images of human colonies being attacked, of ships destroyed, of the galaxy slowly pressing in on humanity from all sides. We realized that if we stayed, we had two choices. We could become conquerors ourselves, using our abilities to carve out an empire, or we could be conquered, becoming someone else's tools. Neither option was acceptable. So you ran away, Velsharn said. He had been silent until now, but his voice dripped with contempt. You hid like cowards. Chen turned to look at the Krithian ambassador. We made a choice, Ambassador Velsharn. We decided that if the galaxy insisted on endless war, we would remove ourselves from it. We came home. We sealed our borders. We asked only to be left alone. And you built your defense network, Cross said. We built our defense network, Chen confirmed, because we knew the galaxy would not respect a simple request. We knew that eventually, someone would decide to test our boundaries. Someone like you, Admiral. The holographic display changed again, showing the battle that had just occurred. The Imperial officers watched their own defeat from new angles, seeing how completely outmatched they had been. You could have destroyed us, Cross said quietly. Yes. Why didn't you? Chen was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with old pain. Because we remember who we were. Humans have fought terrible wars, Admiral. We have committed genocides. We have enslaved and murdered and destroyed. For thousands of years, we were as violent as any species you've met. Maybe more so. He looked at each of the Imperial officers in turn. We know what it means to be a warrior species. We know the pride, the glory, the satisfaction of victory. We also know the guilt, the horror, the weight of all the dead. We spent 200 years learning to be better, learning to build instead of destroy, and we will not become what we once were, not even to defend ourselves. Then you are weak, Velsharn said. Are we? Chen smiled sadly. Ambassador, your fleet was defeated in 6 hours without a single casualty on either side. We could have killed 6 million of your people with the same effort it took to capture them. Does that sound weak to you? Velsharn had no answer. Chen continued. Let me show you what we've built in our isolation. Not our weapons. Our civilization. The holographic display changed once more, showing images of Earth. The Imperial officers saw cities that floated above restored forests, oceans that were clean and full of life, deserts that had been transformed into gardens. It was a world that seemed too beautiful to be real. No poverty, Chen said softly. No hunger. No disease we cannot cure, no wars. We still have disagreements, conflicts, problems to solve. But we solve them with words and ideas, not weapons. This is what we built while you were conquering each other. The images continued. Colonies on Mars, now a green world with breathable air. Cities beneath the ice of Europa. Farms in the clouds of Venus. Humanity had transformed their entire solar system into a paradise. You see, Admiral, we learned something important. War takes resources. Conquest takes energy. Maintaining an empire requires constant effort and the price of arrogance. 3 days after the fleet's capture, Ambassador Velsharn sat in his assigned quarters on Station Haven, staring out at the swirling clouds of Jupiter. The room was comfortable, even luxurious by some standards. The humans had provided everything he might need. Food suitable for his biology, entertainment options, even access to limited communications with the rest of the detained Imperial forces. But it was still a cage, no matter how gilded. A knock came at his door. He did not answer, but the door opened anyway. Lieutenant Sarah Chen entered, carrying a datapad. Ambassador Velsharn, the Council has requested a full tour of Earth for the senior diplomatic staff. Ambassador Chen thought you would want to join. Why would I want to see more of your world? Velsharn's tail lashed behind him. So you can gloat more about your paradise? No, Sarah said simply. So you can understand what you're really dealing with. The defense network you encountered? That's just machinery. Automated systems. You haven't actually met humanity yet. Not really. Against his better judgment, Velsharn found himself curious. Very well. I will come. The transport that took them to Earth was larger than the previous one, designed to carry 50 passengers. Admiral Cross and Commander Velthra were there, along with ambassadors and senior officers from a dozen different species. They sat in silence as the transport left Jupiter's atmosphere and crossed the solar system toward the small blue world that was humanity's homeworld. Earth grew larger in the viewports. From orbit, it was breathtaking. Blue oceans, green and brown continents, white clouds swirling in patterns that seemed almost artistic. But what struck the Imperial officers most were the lights. Even during the day, they could see cities glowing with energy. At night, the entire planet sparkled like a jewel. How many humans are there? Cross asked. On Earth? About 3 billion, Sarah replied. Another 2 billion throughout the rest of the solar system. Mars, Venus, the orbital stations, the moon colonies. We're spread out now. 5 billion, Velthra breathed. That's more than we expected. Did you think we were dying out? Sarah smiled. No, Ambassador. We're thriving. We've just chosen not to expand beyond our own system. We have plenty of room here. The transport descended through Earth's atmosphere. The Imperial officers pressed against the viewports, watching the landscape pass below. Forests stretched as far as they could see. Rivers wound through valleys. Mountains rose sharp and clean against the sky. And among it all, cities that seemed to grow organically from the landscape rather than being imposed upon it. They landed in a city called New Singapore, built on what had once been an island nation. The buildings rose high but were covered in plants, vertical gardens that made each structure look like a living thing. Transportation moved silently through the air on magnetic rails. People walked through parks and plazas, talking and laughing. Sarah led them through the city streets. Humans stopped to stare at the alien visitors, but there was no fear in their expressions, only curiosity. Children pointed and asked their parents questions. Some people waved, friendly gestures that the Imperial officers did not know how to return. "Where are your soldiers?" Velsharn demanded. "Your police? Your security forces?" "We have them," Sarah replied. "But not many are needed in cities anymore. Crime is rare when everyone has what they need. Violence is unusual when people have better ways to solve their problems." "Impossible," Velsharn muttered. "Every civilization has crime. Every species has violence. We didn't say we eliminated it," Sarah corrected. "We said it was rare. We still have problems, Ambassador. We just solve most of them before they become violent." They visited a hospital next, a massive complex where humans were treating everything from simple injuries to complex diseases. The technology on display was impressive, but what struck the Imperial officers more was the attitude of the people working there. They seemed happy, content. There was no sense of the desperate urgency that marked hospitals in Imperial space. "How much does treatment cost?" Cross asked a doctor they met. The doctor looked confused. "Cost? Nothing. Everyone has a right to health care. It's one of our fundamental principles. But someone must pay," Cross insisted. "The equipment, the medicine, the labor." "Society pays," the doctor explained patiently. "Through our resource allocation systems. Everyone contributes what they can, and everyone receives what they need. It's not complicated, but to the Imperial officers it was very complicated. Their economies ran on scarcity and competition. The idea of simply providing for everyone's needs seemed impossible. Surely someone was being exploited to make this work. Surely there was a hidden cost. They visited schools next, where human children learned alongside robotic tutors and human teachers. The curriculum included not just science and mathematics, but philosophy, art, ethics. Children were taught to question, to think critically, to consider different perspectives. "You teach them to question authority?" Velsharn asked, watching a classroom where teenagers were debating the merits of different governmental systems. "Of course," Sarah replied. "How else will they improve our society? Every generation needs to think about how to make things better. That requires questioning what came before." "That sounds like a recipe for chaos." "It's a recipe for progress," Sarah countered. "Our civilization isn't perfect, Ambassador. We make mistakes, but we've built systems that allow us to recognize those mistakes and correct them. That requires people who can think independently." The final stop on their tour was a simple home in a suburban area. A family lived there, 2 parents and 3 children. They had invited the Imperial delegation for dinner, wanting to show them ordinary human life. The family home was comfortable, but not extravagant. The parents both worked, one as an engineer and the other as an artist. The children attended local schools. They had hobbies, friends, dreams for the future. They were, in every way, an ordinary family. Over dinner, Admiral Cross asked the question that had been bothering him all day. "Aren't you afraid? You know what exists out in the galaxy. You know there are species that would conquer you if they could. Don't you want humanity to be stronger, to expand, to protect yourself by dominating others?" The father, whose name was Marcus, considered the question carefully. "Admiral, I've read the history books. I know what humans were like before we came home from the stars. I know about our wars, our genocides, our empires. That history terrifies me far more than anything outside our system." "I don't understand," Cross said. "We learned something important," Marcus explained. "The greatest threat to humanity has always been humanity itself. Not aliens, not natural disasters. Us, our own capacity for violence and cruelty. So we built a society that minimizes those tendencies. We created abundance so people don't fight over resources. We built systems that resolve conflicts peacefully. We taught our children to value cooperation over domination. Marcus's wife Elena added, and we built defenses strong enough that we never have to make the choice between conquering others or being conquered ourselves. We can simply be, but don't you want more? Velthra asked. Don't you want to explore? To expand, to grow? We do explore, Elena said. We send probes throughout the galaxy. We listen to your broadcasts. We study your cultures. We learn everything we can. We just do it without needing to control or conquer. The youngest child, a girl named Maya who was perhaps 8 years old, looked up at the alien visitors with wide eyes. My teacher says that other species fight all the time. Is that true? Velsharn looked down at the child. For the first time since arriving in the Sol system, he felt something crack in his certainty. Yes, he admitted. It is true. Why? Maya asked. It was such a simple question. A child's question. But Velsharn found he had no good answer. Because that's how it's always been. Because the strong deserve to rule. Because conquest brings glory. None of those answers seemed adequate when faced with a child's innocent curiosity. I don't know, he finally said. After dinner, as they walked back to the transport, Velsharn pulled Ambassador Chen aside. This is all very impressive, he said. Your cities, your technology, your happy families. But it's a fantasy. It cannot last. The galaxy doesn't work this way. The galaxy doesn't work this way because species like yours don't let it. Chen replied calmly. You maintain the system through violence. You convince yourselves that domination is natural, that peace is impossible, that this is simply how things are. But we've proven otherwise. In isolation, Velsharn argued. You hide behind your borders and claim superiority. Let's see how long your paradise lasts when you have to actually engage with the galaxy. We're about to find out, Chen said quietly. What do you mean? Chen pulled out a datapad and handed it to Velsharn. We've decided to break our isolation. Not physically. We're not sending ships to your worlds or armies to your systems, but we are going to send something more dangerous. Velsharn looked at the datapad. It showed a communication plan, a massive broadcast that would reach every inhabited system in the galaxy. What is this? The truth, Chen replied. We're going to show the entire galaxy what we've shown you. Images of Earth, explanations of our society, proof that... A new choice. The broadcast reached every inhabited world in the galaxy within 3 days. It could not be blocked, could not be censored, could not be stopped. Human technology had found frequencies and methods that bypassed every known communications barrier. On 1,000 worlds, billions of beings saw the same images. Earth green and peaceful. Human cities clean and prosperous. Children playing in parks. Families eating dinner together. A civilization without war. And then they heard the question, are you happy with how things are? The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The Grand Chamber was filled with angry voices, with demands for action, with calls for immediate military response. Ambassador Velsharn stood at his place, his tail rigid with tension, watching the chaos unfold around him. This is an invasion, shouted the representative from the Talvorn Dominion. They are attacking our way of life. We must respond with overwhelming force. With what forces? Commander Velthra asked quietly. She had been invited to address the council upon their return. Our greatest fleet was captured without firing a single effective shot. They held 6 million of our people hostage and returned every one of them unharmed. What do you imagine we can do against them? Assemble a larger fleet, someone shouted. Every ship, every species. We will overwhelm them with numbers. Keeper Zin, who had remained silent throughout most of the debate, finally spoke. His ancient voice cut through the noise. And how many millions will you send to their deaths? Because make no mistake, if we attack them again, they may not be so merciful. We violated their borders. We ignored their warnings. They defeated us and then showed us mercy. Now you want to repay that mercy with another invasion? What would you have us do? Velsharn demanded. Simply accept this? Allow them to poison the minds of our citizens with their idealistic propaganda? Is it propaganda if it's true? Zin asked. I've read Commander Velthra's full report. I've seen the evidence. Everything the humans showed you was real. They have built a society that works. Perhaps instead of attacking them, we should ask ourselves why their way of life seems so threatening to us. The debate raged for days. In the end, the council was paralyzed. Some members wanted war. Others urged caution. A few like Zinn suggested that humanity's message might deserve consideration. No consensus could be reached. But while the council argued, the galaxy was changing. On a mining world in the Outer Rim, workers who had labored in dangerous conditions for their entire lives saw images of human workers operating with safety equipment and fair schedules. They began to ask their overseers, why can't we have this? On an agricultural planet that exported all its food while its own people went hungry, farmers saw human communities where no one starved. They began to withhold their crops, demanding change. On a dozen fortress worlds where warrior species had built their cultures around conquest and glory, young soldiers saw human children learning philosophy and art. Some began to question whether endless war was truly the only path to honor. The human broadcast had included one more element that Ambassador Chen had not mentioned to Velsharn. It was a simple offer. Any world that wishes to govern itself, any species that wishes to be free from imperial control, may request Terran protection. We will not come to you. We will not impose our way of life upon you. But if you ask for help, if you truly choose freedom, we will shield you the same way we shield ourselves. The first world to accept was a small colony of herbivorous beings called the Tillari. They had been conquered by the Empire generations ago and forced to provide food for military operations. They sent a simple message to the Sol system. We wish to be free. The response came within hours. A Terran defense platform materialized in orbit around their world, transported through space by the same technology that had captured the Imperial fleet. It was a sphere of gleaming metal, geometric and perfect. It broadcast a message. This world is now under Terran protection. Any attempt at coercion, conquest, or control will be met with defensive measures. The people of this world have chosen self-determination. That choice will be respected. The Imperial governor who had ruled the Tillari fled without attempting resistance. He had seen what happened to the fleet. He wanted no part of testing human defenses. Within a week, 17 more worlds requested Terran protection. Within a month, over 100. They were mostly small colonies, weak species who had been conquered or marginalized by the Empire. But each one represented a crack in the Empire's foundation, and humanity kept their word. They did not send armies to occupy these worlds. They did not install human governors. They simply placed defense platforms in orbit and provided access to technology and resources. Each world was free to govern itself, to develop its own culture, to choose its own path. Some of these worlds descended into chaos as old power structures collapsed. Others thrived, building new societies based on cooperation rather than domination. Humanity helped where asked but did not impose. They were content to let each species find their own way. Admiral Cross watched these developments from his home on Krithia Prime. He had been relieved of command upon his return, branded as the architect of the Empire's greatest defeat. But he was not executed or imprisoned. The Empire had enough problems without making martyrs of its failed commanders. He sat in his study, reading reports from across the galaxy, when a message arrived on his private terminal. It was from Ambassador Chen. Admiral Cross, I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to thank you personally for your role in recent events. You came to our system with the intention of bringing us into the Empire. Instead, you helped us bring a better way to the galaxy. I know you did not intend this outcome, but I believe history will judge you more kindly than your empire currently does. If you ever wish to visit Earth again, as a guest rather than a prisoner, you would be welcome. We could use voices of experience as we navigate these new relationships with the galaxy. Consider it an open invitation. Cross stared at the message for a long time. Part of him wanted to delete it, to forget everything he had seen in the Sol system. But another part, a part that had been growing since he watched that human family eat dinner together, wanted to accept. Meanwhile, Ambassador Velsharn faced his own choice. He had returned to Krithia Prime as well, his political standing damaged but not destroyed. The Krithian High Command wanted to know everything about humanity, and Velsharn was their primary source of information. He stood before the assembled commanders, the greatest warriors of his species, and prepared to give his report. He could tell them what they wanted to hear, that humanity was a threat that must be eliminated, that their way of life was weak, that Krithian strength would eventually prevail. Many in the chamber expected exactly that, or he could tell the truth. Velsharn thought about little Maya, the human child who had asked him such a simple question. Why? He thought about Marcus and Elena, living their peaceful lives without fear. He thought about the human cities, the schools, the hospitals. He thought about a civilization that had chosen to build rather than destroy. Honored commanders, he began, his voice carrying through the silent chamber. I stand before you as the ambassador who convinced the council to violate the Sol prohibition. I take full responsibility for the consequences of that decision, and I must tell you that what I learned in human space has fundamentally changed my understanding of strength. He activated a holographic display, showing the images from Earth. We Crithians pride ourselves on our martial prowess. We have never known defeat in open combat. Our honor is built on conquest and glory. But the humans showed me something I had never considered. What if true strength lies not in the ability to defeat others, but in the ability to defeat yourself? Murmurs ran through the chamber. Some commanders looked angry, others confused. A few seemed thoughtful. The humans were once like us, Velsharn continued, violent, warlike, constantly fighting among themselves. They conquered their own world multiple times over. They built weapons capable of destroying their entire civilization, and then they chose to stop. Not because they were weak, but because they were strong enough to recognize that their path led only to destruction. He showed images of the Terran Defense Network, the captured Imperial fleet. They built these defenses not to conquer, but to protect their choice. They could rule the galaxy if they wished. Instead, they chose to tend their gardens. They chose to eliminate poverty, disease, war. They chose to build a civilization where children can ask why without fear. And what would you have us do? Demanded General Kraith, one of the most decorated warriors in Crithian history. Abandon our ways? Become soft like the humans? No, Velsharn said firmly. I would have us question our ways. I would have us ask ourselves the same question the humans are asking the galaxy. Are we happy with how things are? Is endless war truly the only path to honor? Is conquest truly the only measure of strength? You speak of weakness, Kraith roared. I speak of choice. Velsharn roared back, his voice carrying all the authority of his position. The humans made a choice 200 years ago. Now they are offering that same choice to the galaxy. We can continue as we have, fighting and conquering and claiming it is the only way, or we can consider that there might be a better path.